All right, what's going on, everyone? It is I, Mr. Shea, on a lovely January day on the beach because, summer's coming and I got to get ready. Great Depression, one of the worst events in American history that lasted many years. So, understanding what caused that event is really what we're looking at today. And y'all should go for a walk outside. I know it's cold, but, it's nice out. I don't know what's going on my screen, which is why it looks a bit weird today. So I'm just going to kind of click through these things. I don't really know what's going to happen because I can't present it. Maybe I'll just hit present. I'll disappear for a bit. I'll come back. So one of the biggest causes of the Great Depression is changes in spending habits. A lot of American homes up until, the early 1920s kind of look like this. They're pretty sparsely furnished, but they have all the elements that are needed. However, with this new production of really these factory lines where goods can be produced rapidly at a fairly cheap cost, Americans start to buy other things like refrigerators. This is a refrigerator ad from 1926, $285 for that, which suddenly opens up Americans in their homes to having far more goods and options when it comes to food, and it's safer. You're not storing goods out in the whatever air you are at. So food doesn't spoil as quickly because it can be refrigerated. And Americans start to buy these items, other things like cars and washing machines, and they do it through what's known as installment buying. So a lot of Americans cannot afford $285. So what they do is they pay it off over time at a higher interest rate. So if you buy a $285 refrigerator, you might have 2 years to pay it off, but with interest, you might end up paying $350. So Americans are able to afford these things because they don't have to pay for it all at once. Now, that seems like a great idea. However, they are signing these installment plans with the assumption that their money that they're making will remain the same. Now, that also means the goods inside of their houses that they are buying on installment plans are not theirs until they fully pay for it. So if they can only pay for 12 months out of a 24-month plan, they lose their item. So they've spent all that money and have nothing to show for it. So Americans everywhere in America are buying things because the economy is good in the 20s after World War I, and they have confidence that it's going to remain so. So people in towns and cities are buying things, and farmers are also doing the same exact, well, not buying refrigerators, but they might be buying farm machines and harvesters and more land so they can make more money. So many, many Americans, millions of them, are getting into debt because they're confident that the economy is going to remain the same. Spoiler alert, doesn't. Because there's a lot of factors going on outside of most Americans' knowledge, including overproduction. So when companies are producing all these cars and refrigerators and washing machines, they are doing it and hiring many people. In this image, you have all these women that are working. But since they can produce these objects so quickly and cheaply, there's an assumption that Americans will continue to buy them. However, once you have one washing machine, you generally don't need another one for a while. Same with a car. You generally try to hold on to these high-cost items as long as you can. So factories are cranking out all of these items, but after a point, people aren't buying them anymore. Which, when people aren't buying objects and items, first they lay off factory workers because they don't need to make anymore. And then they start to lay off the salespeople that are selling these. So there's this ripple effect of when people stop buying objects and items, then many other people are losing their jobs. So car workers and really anyone else. Now, we also have problems in Wall Street and in the financial sector. So One thing we start to see is selling on margin. I should say buying on margin. Investors in Wall Street are confident in the economy, and they are so confident that they want to invest a lot of money in it. So what they do is they end up borrowing money from banks to invest in stocks. Now, that is a terrible idea because banks are loaning out money and investors are investing it with really not much concern because it's really not theirs. So when you buy on margin, you have the ability to be riskier in your bets because of your presumed confidence in the stock market. So we have a lot of these stocks that are being bought with money that actually isn't the person who's investing it, which in a little bit we'll get into why that's a problem. The banks, on the other hand, who are lending out money, are not only lending out money to investors, but they are lending out money to tons of people. They are taking in deposits. People are depositing in the bank. They then use that money to loan out to other people. So if you go into the bank and deposit $500, the bank does not just keep it there. They loan it out to someone in the community. They might loan it out to a local business person who wants to build a new room for their restaurant. So banks start to make riskier and riskier investments, which means that they lend out money that has high interest rates. So if they don't really trust that a business venture might succeed, they just put a high interest rate on it so they can actually make a lot of money. This is, once again, presuming that the economy is strong and it will not collapse. So banks are taking people's monies, investing it in perhaps not the greatest ideas, and people are buying objects that they are hoping will stay valuable and hoping they can keep paying for. And investors are investing money that they hope they can pay back as well. So there's a lot of assumption going on in the Great Depression, or prior to the Great Depression, and all of that goes away. So Black Tuesday, the stock market crashes. And by that, the value of the stocks plunge because people start to realize that what the economy is propped up on is hope that the economy is doing well, when in reality, people are getting laid off. People are sinking further and further into debt. And really, the economy is not strong at all. So the stock market crashes. And what happens is people then are afraid and they run to the banks to take their money out. And it turns out the banks don't actually have enough money to cover all of these withdrawals. So people are suddenly left with nothing. Banks collapse. The stock market has collapsed as well. So if you had money in the stock market, you've lost it. If you had money in the banks, a majority of those people have lost their money as well. So this really affects not just investors and the rich, it affects everyone in America. So suddenly the wealth that Americans thought they had has disappeared, which is horrifying because there are protections today, and we'll get into that. But this sort of thing can still happen. And when we get into the 2008 financial crisis later in the year, we'll talk about some of these similar problems that occurred. To try to fix the Great Depression, something called the Smoot-Hawley Tariff is put into place, which a tariff puts additional money, taxes essentially, on goods that are coming into the country. So if a foreign company is selling sneakers in the United States, then a tariff increases the price of those so that American sneakers are cheaper. Now, this seems like a good idea, and if you don't think about it, but when the United States puts this tariff called the Smoot-Hawley Tariff in 1930, it increases the prices of foreign goods, so American goods are cheaper. However, other countries can do the exact same thing. So what happens is, if you look at this chart here, countries like France in 1925, they only have a 9% tariff on goods coming from other countries. And in response to the Americans' Smoot-Hawley Tariff, they crank it up to 38%. So now American goods are 38% more expensive 50% more expensive in France. Thus, people buy French goods. So if you look 1931, virtually every country in the world, in this chart at least, has increased their tariffs on American goods. So now people aren't buying American goods anymore, which, instead of solving this problem, has now exacerbated it. That the Smoot-Hawley Tariff stops other countries from buying American goods and plunging, in reality, the entire world into financial chaos, which is why the Great Depression does not just hit the United States, but it is a worldwide depression. So all of that is what contributes to the Great Depression and sparks off decades of economic downturn around the world. And it's a bummer. And we'll be looking more into class about the realities of the Great Depression and what it means for Americans and how they endeavor to fix it. So we will talk more about this in class. If you are a stranger watching, drink some tea, go for a walk, and we'll check y'all later.